All right. Hello, good morning. Um, so let's see. I did some thinking yesterday, and I thought, like I mentioned it on the stream yesterday, it would be really cool to, like, Mobx is so old, right? Just looking at the website as well, like it's just very old. Um, but and it's unique, right? Because with all this signal stuff going on, like Signals and Mobx have like a common approach to like observability, but Signals are like low level primitives that doesn't allow you to as naturally make changes to state as you can with Mobx. Like you can't do nested changes in the signal. So a signal is really just like useState. It's just that it's based on observability. While Mobx is like mutable nested changes, which is why it's so performant. And why it has such a natural API. Like it's just JavaScript. Like you can argue about these proxies leaking out when you do a console log, but that's just a runtime. Like when you write your code, it's pretty awesome. Yarn docs dev. So, oh yeah. So I thought I would just try to. How do I set the standard node? Again. Oh. How do I set the standard node version with NVM? I guess it's just NVM default or something. Oh my god. Will probably be faster. Oh, alias. That was. And then it's the version 20. Okay. Oh, come on. NVM use default. Can I do that? Yeah. Yarn. What was I saying? Yeah, so docs dev. So now there's this. I thought I would kind of just try it to see how it felt like. Oh, didn't you start? Okay. 73. And just adding VPress and just configuring it and opening the page, it was like, okay, there's something here. Like if you think about the old Mobx page, it's just like everything about Mobx makes it feel a bit old. And like just using classes and all of this. So having like a Mobx reimagined, where you have a functional approach, not like functional programming approach, but you use functions instead of classes, right? And you just reduce the API surface down to a single primitive of reactive, and we apply like more practical utilities around state management, like query and mutation, based on what's actually happened in the React ecosystem. And we target it for React. That's also a thing. I guess you don't. Yeah, that's true. Like it doesn't have to be targeted for React, but it makes a lot of sense that it is when we use functions and stuff, and like suspense and all of this. But it's kind of cool. Mobx reactive, Mobx reimagine, closing the gap between Mobx state management and React. So this statement is about like how we're actually reducing the mind shift cost of like moving between an object-oriented class-based approach versus like functional components. And like data management in like Mobx is very much like how you would do data management in React, and so on and so on. So yeah, I kind of like this. I'm gonna we're not gonna play around with this on the stream because it's kind of boring seeing me try to write stuff and never be happy about it. But I thought it's something that's worth exploring. Yeah, I'm trying my best here with a mental model. Yeah, so that's that. But I thought we could rather do some coding. First of all, I want to fix this thing. We had check if object is class. So this was a nice way to check. Oh, let's see. What was it? We're gonna do this check. If target equals null, yeah, or type of target. So if target equals null or type of target does not equal object, or if it does equal object, let's look at the target is not equal to object. I think that's gonna fix it. Yeah, so now we're just generally checking, like if anything is like native classes or anything, we don't do anything about it on the read-only proxy. The read-only proxy is only for like plain objects. Yeah. And then let's see. And then I was reflecting on the query. I wanted to do something with the query. Because there's something that the query doesn't currently support, and that is you kind of forced it to be the data you return from the server. So there's a couple of things about that. First of all, typically you grab entities by resource, right? Not by resource, but you grab them by they are collections. I mean, so you get an array of data items, but an array is not necessarily what you want. Often you want it to be an object, or maybe you actually want to derive that data into something. And this has to happen in the query for it to be able to like revalidate and compare changes. So I thought about this API where you could have an optional transform. So basically you have transform where you, well, this would be O. Oh, yeah, how should we do this? I guess we need to do this. So you might have a fetcher with two things. O, where you actually have the transform. Oh, wait, sorry. This is still T. Oh yeah, sorry. And then this becomes O. Or you have without the thing, no transform. And then it becomes T. And then the actual implementation, I guess, would be T, O, transform might be there. I guess something like this, O equals T. I don't know, something like that. Yeah, and then it starts. Yeah, I really dislike overrides. Like what I typically do is that I don't type this thing. I just type the Because I don't think it actually matters. Oh, look at that. Like these type overrides is actually going to handle this. But let's ask it. What would the type for the actual implementation here be? How do I merge these two overrides? Oh, do you say I can just do that? But what if I don't have a transform? Oh, I can actually do this. Oh, nice. Okay, let's try that then. Well, yeah, I still get the error though. Oh my god. You know what we can do? I think we can do this instead. So transform, and then we just say data. Why is this wrong? Oh, interesting. Why does it say that? No infer. Huh. Why does it say that it's not? What am I misunderstanding here? So this is T. This is what we actually get from the server. And then we have transform, where we get the data, what's coming from the server, and we're returning a new type. No, but they're not related. I don't understand this. I'm not saying that. Oh, here it says query. Oh, sorry. It's my query T here. Ah. Oh, look at this. Now it's completely bonkers. And this still doesn't work. What the fuck? Yeah, all of this needs to be like, oh. Ah, my god. This is annoying. Let's see if we can fix this. T. So be O. Execute query. O. Yeah, and this needs to be yeah, so this is interesting. So this will be yeah, exactly. So this will be a promise of O. So we're going to do a den on this, and we're going to transform it. There we go. There we go. But why is this complaining? Why am I getting an error on my default callback of transform? It states that what does it state? A T is not assignable to O. Why? They are. The error is occurring because your default function is T data. I'm sure they are the same type. No? That's weird. Like, what if I do true? But, huh? like, do I have to do extends any or something? No. Like, why doesn't, I don't understand this. I'm just saying O. Whatever I want O to be is going to be what I return from this transform. So in this case, O becomes T. Yeah, but why do I have to fucking cast it? Like, this should just work. And what about if anyone else goes in and calls the transform or passes a callback? They will also have the same problem, right? If I do this from the outside. Okay, so it works from the outside. It's just from the inside. Oh, is that the whole point? It's because I'm doing it from the inside? Oh, yeah, that's probably it. Because here, this is T, right? It's not like, this is just a T. It's not an actual thing. Like, I don't know what this is. It's just a T. As opposed to when I call it from the outside, there's an actual fetcher there. Okay. Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. Okay, so the whole point of this is that yeah, thanks Adam. So the whole point of this is that now you're able to, for example, say that no, I want this array return to be a record for lookup, for example, or I want every data item to be wrapped in this other reactive wrapper. And what's kind of cool about that is that we can still do efficient updates. So I thought we could try to implement that. So whenever we revalidate, we run the same fetch, right? But unlike, and we are gonna update the promise. But let's see how we're gonna do this. How do we actually? Yeah, we're getting a new promise here. How are we gonna do this? Okay, let's not think about the promise first, but what we have here is, oh, because we're using promise.value. Okay. So what we need to do is, where should we do it? I wonder if we should actually do it here. Where should we do that? So basically what's going to happen is that we're going to, on revalidate, we are going to fetch again. We're going to run through the transform. But then we're going to compare that transform with what value we already have. And then we're not going to actually replace the existing value. We're rather going to update the value. So it's much better that we go through the data and update the exact changes as opposed to React like reconciling everything. Let's see, but where should we do this? Create observable promise. So this is where we get the new value. So I guess it needs to happen here. Well, no, we're getting a fulfilled promise here. So we get the new value. Yeah, so what we kind of want to do is, this is where we want to do it. So if the promise is, yeah, and we of course only want to do it when it's fulfilled. That's of course. So, and here we have the value, but we're also setting the promise here. So we have to make sure that these two values are the same. So that's the tricky thing here. We're already getting the promise here with the result value. So it needs to happen before this. So I'm wondering if it should already happen here. And that also means it's actually fulfilled, right? So yeah, maybe we should actually have a callback here. So here we get the value. And then we need to transform value. We transform it. And then we need to existing value. Oh, but that's also a problem because we have the board controller. Okay, I'm just gonna code it for now and then we can clean it up. So if we already have so well, so you don't necessarily need an identity. You can just like just compare. So you're getting a JSON. You have like you don't necessarily have a pure JSON because you might be transforming it into like other reactive wrappers and stuff. But the point is that you're getting the same thing. The problem is if the order changes. Yeah, maybe you need an identifier. Yeah, and that's a tricky thing. Yeah, it will change. But at the same time, that might be... Well, yeah, that's not ideal for reconciliation, because then you'll be updating a bunch of stuff you don't need to update. Yeah, but then it becomes tricky, because query doesn't necessarily... But this is super important, I think, to have a concept of this, because if you have revalidate, like if we don't have a concept of this, you can only use revalidate for pure data. You can't or you can't have any update mechanism. So it will be like immutable. And that's kind of the whole point of Mobx, is to not have it immutable. Yeah. Oh, what the hell? What the hell happened there? Anyways, yeah, you can check them shallowly, but at the same time, it's like, what if you have like 100 entities and then you delete the first one? And then it's gonna like make everyone like update, like all the 99 first items is gonna change all their values and just cause a havoc in reconciliation. like the thing you do with query is to actually like it's like the 90% you have a resource ID. And then there are like certain other cases where you don't like fetch an actual resource on the server. But then you shouldn't use query, I'm thinking. Like query is to query collections or records. That's what it's designed for. And if you don't need that, like you don't, that's why you want to revalidate and everything, because you're changing like data. And if you have other kinds of data that's not tied to collections or records, it's like, well, don't use query then. Then it's some kind of other kind of endpoint where you can just call it. Like it would probably more be of a type of what's it called? Like you do an operation or something. It's like a side effect kind of thing. But that doesn't like guarantee that this will work, because your resources might have use other fields than ID, right? It might be underscore ID, for example. But the point is, like, I really want to see a world where like it's React query for Mobx, and it handles this, like it takes full advantage of Mobx and makes all updates super efficient. You don't have to think about it. You just say, this is where I fetch my data, this is how I want to store that data, and then it will optimally, you can just call revalidate and it will optimally update that data. That's really cool. That's what I want. But that can only be done if query is about resources. Or you have to like configure that, which is like, yeah. Yeah. But I feel like we're overgrowing the signature of this thing. I was even hesitant adding the second callback, but it kind of felt like it made sense. Like you're fetching something, it feels almost like you're denning or like you're calling this and then you do .den transform, but then this defining the identity that doesn't feel as natural. And then you have like 3 arguments where you might want to do an object instead, but then you have an object and then it doesn't feel as simple anymore. I was also thinking about one thing that you could also do is when you transform, you could extend the O with like a compare function. So you would say, so you basically, like when you transform it into something, you create like a compare function for that thing that you transform it into. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you mean. I think the thing for me isn't the performance, it's the deriving thing that bothers me the most. That you're like replacing. Like you need to be able to change that from an array into an object, for example, or you want to map over those array items and make them like some wrap reactive. That's the most important part. Yeah. But you can do that with just the transform. But yeah, I'm stuck on this. Like, if you flip the completed of a to do, why the hell do you need to update all the to dos? You shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to just render the actual thing, the actual to do. That reminds me also, like, you should be able to override mutations. Do we allow that now? Yeah, we abort it. Yeah. Okay, that works. That's cool. Um Yeah, but just to complete that perspective, like you can say O needs to extend a compare function. How would that look like? Let's imagine you have that. So if you were to like query something, promise dot resolve, like you have an array of something, and then you want to transform that, for example, into an object. List list.map or reduce so something like this, item. So you say item dot id equals item return, something like that, right? You want a lookup record instead, and then here you could even like do call item and pass in item, like you can do whatever you want, but you also need to return. What would that look like? So just to have an example, like compare or something, and it could even be optional, right? So you can say O extends. So let's just do query compare, or query update or something. Query update. So if you have that symbol in there, it's gonna call it. But you have to implement. So what you get here is like old value, right? And then you manually update it. So here you could even just do. Yeah, that's interesting. So you wouldn't even need to transform this. So if you have an existing value with like the notion of I'm gonna handle the update, you define that function and you just get the data. So you get T here, right? So there's two ways to do this. And then you can go here, you could then go through, and then you even know what this is, right? So you could have, what if this was like item, doesn't matter. So here you would just go like through each thing. And then you would say like new item. And then if no, sorry. Old value. Oh, sorry. New data value, whatever. So here you could actually manually implement. So here you would just update it. And then if it's in there, you would say value, new item ID dot completed equals value. Sorry, new item dot completed. Stuff like that. So you rather, instead of having an identifier function, you have a function that is the old data and the new data, and you just go in and you and you manually implement how to update those things. So you can control it. So if you want that optimization, you get it exactly like you want it. It's not like some generic, it's kind of like React query. They say, we try our best, right? Which is fine. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm saying with this approach, you get full control if you want that optimization. And what I also like about this is that it would be, so first of all, what I like about this is that first you have to fetch the data. And then if you choose to transform it, you can do that. But only if you choose to transform it, it makes sense to actually keep the thing up to date, right? No, that's not true. Even when you don't transform it, you might want to be able to. Okay, but I like that approach because then it's at least there's a simple implementation and it handles anything and whatever you come up with. The question is more, how do you give that option? Yeah, maybe it should be an options object instead, where you have transform, you have compare, callback, all of those things. Because you can do a fetcher with compare, you can do a fetcher with transform, you can do a fetcher with compare and transform. Or not compare, but like update. Yeah, it needs to be an option subject. It's very interesting, the presentation on React query. They chose to only have an object. But I think at the end of the day, you have to have the fetcher, right? You have to have a fetcher. And then it's more, you can optionally pass query options, right? Yeah. And that equals like nothing. And then type query options TO would be transform like this. And then if you have update, well, what do you call that? What do you call that? Update, I guess. Oh, 2 seconds. I'm at the end of my cold, and it's like there's just, yeah. Oh, look at me, not turning off the or sync, merge. The tricky thing though is when you delete items. That's super tricky because then you have to go through both of them, right? one thing is adding something. You can just check if it's there or not. But then you also have to do the opposite. But what's nice about records is that you can just look at the keys, and then you can iterate the keys and see if it's there or not. Yeah, I think I want to call it, but it's still kind of, I don't know. It's also like you would do the same thing every time. Like there's something about treating resources as an object, and then you have add, remove, modify, right? It's the same every single time. It's the same logic. But at the same time, you might not want to update all the data, for example. Like you might not use all the properties coming from the server. But then again, you can actually check that. So yeah, it's almost like you can have a query and there's no transform, nothing. And then you can have like resource. And resource needs to extend, or you could even call it like collection, reactive collection. And if you call collection, it needs to extend an array where each item has an ID. And that will become a record instead of an array. And then you can transform them, and it will automatically keep it efficiently up to date. But then you will also need like reactive.record kind of thing. That should be bound to the other thing. Yeah, it's interesting because that's another thing. Like if you have one query that grabs the array, and then you have a different query, which is the actual record in that array. You also want them to reference the same entity. This is something that React Query handles. But they base it on the query lookup key. Well, here, I think you would rather, what would you actually do here? I think you would have like just two separate queries that's not part of the state you expose. Or would you? No, yeah, would have to expose them to revalidate them. Ugh. Yeah, like re-implementing React Query is like, I'm diverging. God damn it. And it's also like if I were actually building something, I wouldn't spend time on this, right? Because the query is good enough as it is, and this could be like later updates. But that's not how my brain works. I just get stuck on things all the time. Yeah, how would you actually do this? So yeah. Yeah, maybe we could do that. Just yeah, like a compare. That's a common thing. I never implemented something like that, but I've seen it many times. Like you just get, yeah, you get the T and you get the O, and then are they the same? And if they are, I'm gonna go through the T. But then that means that if you do that, then you have to assume, like, then you would actually go through the array, right? So that's the tricky thing about that one. It's like you have the T, but you don't know what the O is. So if the T is the actual array of items, and then O is a record of items, you wouldn't like, you would want to do it per, like, what does it mean to iterate? It only makes sense if you actually grab arrays, but query doesn't know anything about that. Like, it's not bound to arrays. And that's the annoying thing. So there's no real concept of iteration. And then just like, what if you have, okay, you have to-dos, right? And then you jump directly to a to-do. Like, you have a to-do page. And when you jump there, you actually have the data. Like, you have a query for that to-do. But you also have a query for the to-dos, right? And what you kind of want to happen there is that if I go and query a to-do, I want to update the actual to-dos. So so they have the same reference. So kind of like, and you can do this. It's just that now you do it more imperatively. There's no like declarative. There's not that much magic. You kind of have to wire it up yourself. So you could use like a transform for that. So you're getting like a to-do here, and then in the transform, you would go and say, okay, I'm actually gonna add this to the other thing, like the to-dos record, and then I'm gonna return it from there. You're kind of like deriving it from the to-dos record. So that's the point. It's like this update thing. Where did I have it here? So this update thing, like if we had something like that, it would allow you to handle any kind of like optimizations. But it does require like a lot of implementation. So you would have the actual value here. Let's call that O, and then data T. And then you return O. So what you could do here is like, you can do anything. you can update the existing value. You can update the existing value and assign it to, so if the query here is for a single to-do, you can update that to-do, but you can also go and like add it to the to-dos record so that it's the same reference. The whole point is like, this is exceptionally complicated to make this just work out of the box. Like you need a very high abstraction over data fetching for this kind of functionality to work. Like, okay, you have a collection over here. You're grabbing a specific record over here. You want those to have the same references. You want to transform them. You want to update them. Like all of that stuff requires a very high abstraction to but if you have these like low level things, it's possible to well, first of all, achieve it, but it's also possible to do things like yeah, no, this doesn't feel right. It's getting way too complicated. Like I don't like query at all. I like mutation. I like the mutation thing is awesome because it handles optimistic updates beautifully. It's a really, really good and simple primitive. But this query thing, it really bothers me. Like the good thing about it is suspense, but this whole revalidate everything, it bothers the hell out of me. I would never do that. I would never do that for any application. Like actually go and just fetch all the data again every single time I make a change. One thing is like having an interval and kind of keeping it up to date because I don't have a subscription. That's fine. But like every time I do a mutation, I go and grab everything again. It just feels super, super weird to me. I would just do the mutation and then if everything's fine, it's fine. I don't need to revalidate the data. Because it gets so... Because if you didn't have this abstraction, right, you would just create a fetch. You go and fetch the array of to-dos. And then if you have opening a page with a single to-do, well, you just go and fetch the single to-do and you put it in the to-dos record. Right? You just do it. And then you derive it from there. But now with this query abstraction, you kind of go in and you say that the single to-do is a query. And you have a fetcher, which fetches that thing. But, oh, by the way, it shouldn't only live here. It should also live in the to-dos record. So then you have to like... It feels like you're hacking the query to make that happen, which is super weird. Yeah, so update prop would be like you have to identify deletes. So if, for example, the data here is an array and your value, like you transformed it into a record, for example. So the value is a record and then the data is an array. You go through the array first to figure out that's how you figure out what's added, right? If there's something with an ID in data that's not in the record, it's added. But to figure out what's deleted, you have to do the opposite. You have to object keys the value, go through that array and see if there's something missing in. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry. I was that's how I thought about it as well. But you can't really have that guarantee, right? Because you don't like this could be anything, right? So yeah, it's the full. This is the full data coming from the server, and this is the full transformed value. So this would be the array, and this would be the record, for example. So that gives if you want a flexible low-level API that can handle everything, that's a good way to do it, I think, because that gives you everything you need to identify. It's just that it's a hassle, right? If you're going to implement that manually for every single thing. Oh, you know what you could also do? What you could also do is not have update. Yeah, it's a very good point, Adam. Like, it's unavoidable if you need that performance thing. But for me, it's like the thing I'm struggling with is that it's not really about the performance. It's just about I want things to like understand their relationships, right? Whenever that's the thing I can't deal with in React, it's the waterfall approach. Like you can argue it, you can have metrics or analytics for it, and you can argue as hard as you want that this is performant enough, and it mostly is, right? But just the fact that when I update some state in React and I know all the stuff that's gonna happen, all the reconciliation, it's just so in my face, right? If it was under the hood, I wouldn't care about it. Kind of like React Query, right? It does a lot of comparisons to kind of try to update efficiently, but I don't know about that. It's not in my face. But in React, it's just up in your face all the time, and it just bothers the hell out of me. But what I was thinking, we can do data, and then we can do value, right? And it might be there or it might not be there, because it might be the first transform, right? So what you do is in this transform function, so we can put it back here. I'm going to show you something. So what you could do is I'm going to have my to-dos query. We're going to call query. I'm going to fetch some freaking to-dos. And then I want to actually handle the transform of this. So I'm going to get the data here, and I might have the existing value. So if I have an existing value, then I'm going to do an update of that data, and I'm going to just return the same value, right? So I'm going to say data for each, update the value. Or I'm going to create a new record from this. I'm just going to do like data reduce that thing. Oh, that's weird. Item.id equals item. So I kind of have, okay, maybe it's better to do the opposite. So if no value, I'm going to return the initial value for this. But if I already have the value, I'm going to just update that value, and I'm going to return the same value. So now you have initial value and update value in the same thing. Yeah, like if you actually don't want to transform them, you could do that. Yeah. Right? You could definitely do that. Yeah, or like if no value, return data, right? If you don't actually want to, like, you want to keep it as an array, but you want to efficiently update that array whenever you have an update, right? You could just return the data, and here you would rather iterate the data and update your value, right? Which would be the array. I wonder. Yeah, this is much more efficient, like having it in the transform. So it's basically, it's a reducer, right? Kind of a reducer. Like reducers doesn't mutate, but it kind of is like a reducer. But now you have a lot more flexibility. Well, not a lot more flexibility, but we keep it simple. That's the point. So you just take control of how the value is generated in the first place and how you keep it up to date. The thing that bothers me a little bit here is the typing doesn't understand this. So no infer. How would I? Yeah, it says unknown. Like I am returning. I was hoping it understood that this would be. Yeah, but it's unknown here. It should have been like never. It should have been. I was hoping it would infer that since I return data here with no value. Yeah, that's too much to ask. Yeah, this one's interesting. Like, or undefined. Does that matter? No, I don't think that's gonna like actually work. I'm not saying it's a requirement. It's just, yeah, here it thinks it's an object. That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder how. Yeah. Yeah. um, let's see. Let's see. Do I care about this typing? I think I do. I care about all typing. Like I was hoping TypeScript would actually no infer here. Like I was hoping it would actually infer it from the return type. But it's a complicated thing. Because here we do return that, so that becomes the like return type. But here it doesn't know that. Like it doesn't like first it infers it, here it jumps up there. Like yeah, that doesn't make sense. So I think you would actually have to type this. So you would have to say like, but value is unknown. Yeah, that one's interesting. Ah, that sucks. So it becomes a typing issue. That fucking sucks. Hmm. How does this work in how does this work in yeah, so in oh yeah, but what's interesting about this, like you have in a reducer you have it's the opposite. Like you have the actual value and then you have the data. So let's just make it look like a reducer, first of all. Um yeah, and you need okay, but this is interesting. So value here would have to be like equals something like that. How do you type a reducer? And why does this become yeah, it should work, right? I wonder how the reducer we can check the React reducer. Use reducer. How do they type this? Yeah, it's just S. Oh yeah, but they pass initial state. Hmm. Do, 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 do. Why does it become unknown? And why do I have this bothers me. Why is this unknown? Like, how do you actually do this in thinking? Is it just because you have to explicitly type it? That's not a big deal. Like, you can say string. Oh, what happened there? Why are you complaining? Oh, yeah. So we want to go from string to string, for example. Yeah. No, I think it's just because we have to explicitly type it. And yeah, so and if you would define, okay, so this is interesting. So if I didn't define this here, right, I would put it in a separate function, right? And I would do that, like function update to dos, whatever. Oh, sorry. Something like this. And I would say, I would have to type this, right? I would have to say, and then data is like, yeah, whatever, string. Something like that to make it compatible with this thing. So update to dos. And that would be fine. Yeah, so I think it makes sense. But you might not have that value, right? It might be undefined. So that's the whole thing, which is why we do this default thing. So I think we should call it, I think it should have the same signature as a reducer. So the action kind of becomes, yeah, it's a reducer. But we can call it transform. Okay, but that makes sense. But then there's this other thing of like, what if I have a query for a single to do and then I want this other to do's query to be So I have, I'm opening a single to do. I have a query for fetching that to do. Or maybe I don't, you know? Maybe what you would do there is you would have a getter. No. What would you do there? Would you have a query for that? Things are so much simpler when you just do it manually. Like creating these abstractions, it's so difficult. Okay, so let's imagine it would be a query and you fetch a single to do. And what you want to happen is that whenever you update that single to do, you also want to update the actual to-dos. So they have a relationship. The to-do you reference in the to-dos list is also the to-do you get on a single to-do query. And like the easy thing is like, okay, I have a reference to to-dos here, and I say like, so let's imagine this is like update to do now. This would be like, let's just type to do ID string completed boolean. So you have like a single to do here. Yeah, so this would be to do. And then data would be to do. And then, so this becomes, yeah, exactly. So you might already have a to do there. It becomes more like a transaction. Maybe transaction is a better word for it. No, transaction is something else. Anyways, so this is fine, right? But now you also want to ensure that you have this other to-dos thing, and you want to say like, okay, let's shove the data in there. I want the same reference. I guess what you want to rather say here is like const to do equals value or data. And then you just want to return that to do, unless you want to transform it or something. But why are you complaining? Oh yeah, because this, I guess, or undefined. Yeah, that's the thing that bothers me a little bit. You know what? I think we should do it opposite. And then we do this. I'm not sure if this is going to see the light of day. So now I say that my to-do is either the existing value, or sorry. Yeah, no, sorry. If no value, we're going to return the data. But then what if we want that? Okay, the whole point here is like, what happens to that fucking to-dos query? And the whole point is that you can't do anything about that. You can only revalidate it, right? You can't go there and say, oh, add this to do, because that to do, that query might not have run yet. It might not have anything. So that's also like a really weird thing. So it's like, if you want to do this, like it's so much easier to just do it manually. Like if you want to do this kind of optimization, just don't use query. Just implement the goddamn thing. So you would just have a record of to-dos in your state store or in your state. And then you have a query for fetching the to-dos. And then whenever you want to like revalidate it, you just manually do it and update. And then if you have this nested to-do, you go and you fetch that to-do. But what you do instead is that you don't put it in the state of the actual to-do. You put it in your to-dos, and then you derive the to-do, right? So you don't have a query at all. So maybe it makes sense that, okay, query can be used for just for simplicity's sake. And you can do like a transform if you want to do that, which is just, it takes the data and you give back what it's going to look like. That's it. But every time you revalidate, it's gonna update the whole thing. And if you want to have like a more optimized approach, just don't use query, just implement it. Because it's not that difficult. Like, it's literally like whatever handles the to-dos, it will be like just a plain record. And then you have like fetch to-dos, and you do that whenever you want. And then and yeah, you lose things like suspense, unless you want to manually deal with that, but you probably don't. And you don't have a state of the fetching of the to-dos. You would have to manually handle that. That's also a thing. Like when you ask for a resource or a record, well, if you ask for a collection, it makes a lot of sense to have a default value. Like, just have an empty array or an empty object. But when you ask for a specific record, it doesn't make any sense to have a default value. So like, data is different in that sense. And also in this context, like, what if the query could have a default value of an empty record that was always accessible, right? I could just go in and update that record. So then I will kind of fix the issue. But then we have to introduce default values to queries. And it just it just adds and adds and adds. It's very annoying. Well, what's interesting about that reflection is like, I want the value I get from query is that I get a state for the async process. So I can consume that in React. And I get a suspense promise. That's the value. Like, not the value of the query, but that's what you gain from it. So it's almost like, and that's the interesting thing about mutation, because mutation is the state of the request. It's not the state of the returned value, right? There's something about this. So what if query didn't hold on to a value? What if query was just the fetching? Oh, there's something about this. Oh, I think I have it. I think we're taking too much inspiration from React Query. So what if query doesn't hold on to a value? It's just a query. And when you fetch, you also need to assign that value, right? Oh, this is good. So how this work? Yeah. So the way you rather think about this is that you have a fetcher, but you also need to derive where does the value come from. So you kind of say, yeah, you basically have this. So what should we call this? Well, it's kind of computer or getter, whatever. Let's just call it something. So this getter doesn't do anything like that, but it returns something. Like, I guess this is O. And you have to implement this. So the way you would do this is like, I have function to-dos, and I have my to-dos, whatever, reactive, and I have my query for reactive query. But I will also have my actual to-dos here. So this would be like, this would actually be like fetch to-dos. Oh, sorry, I can call it query. But I have my actual to-dos here in like, okay, let's just make it an array. And then when I fetch the to-dos, let's return to-dos here. Function. Yeah, I don't need that. So when I actually fetch my to-dos, yeah, whatever. Return promise dot resolve. Well, I guess it will be, let's call it async function. To-dos will be await promise dot resolve, like foo bar. And now I actually have to assign it. So I say to-dos dot to-dos equals to-dos. Wait, why are you complaining? This is string array. Oh, sorry. This is the data. Sorry about that. So when you fetch it, it doesn't actually return the value to the query. You have to put the data somewhere, because this is just the query. But then you can say to-dos dot to-dos. Yeah. Then I have to do. Does this make sense? So you're deriving, yeah. So you could even, so you could even do this. To-dos data, reactive string array. So you have to-dos data, and then you have, yeah, it's gonna return to-dos data. Can I do this now? Yeah, exactly. So we have this query, but we don't store the value in the query. We rather derive it from somewhere. So I'm gonna say, yeah, I guess I kind of, this kind of sucks. This is the thing that sucks with, not sucks with Mobx, but it's the problem with the Mobx approach, is that if I have an array here, I can't like replace the array. I have to kind of, or I would have to do something like this. To-dos like this. So let's do that. Data to-dos, and then let's, but I'm onto something here, I promise. So I have my data here, and I have my query, and I fetch the to-dos, and when I do that, I'm gonna say data.todos equals data. What happened now? Oh, fuck. To-dos. And now this is a computed, so, or it's derived, right? So whenever I check the query and the query is like fulfilled, it's gonna return this. And then if I have like a nested to do here, so let's see. So let's imagine I map these to-dos to like a to-do kind of thing. So I would have function to do. Let's see. So let's do like a proper thing here. So I'm gonna type to do equals return type of to do. And then we have type to do DTO, which is like ID string completed boolean. And then here we're gonna have a record of string to do. And when we map over this, we're gonna have, so this is gonna be, let's just call it to do DTO. And then we're gonna map over those to-dos. We're gonna get the data and we're gonna pass the actual, let's call it to do, let's call it DTO. We're gonna pass the DTO and the actual to-dos data, I think. What, does this even make sense? Does this even make sense? This is the thing I'm also struggling with. It's like, what if I have a URL that goes directly to a to-do? And then I want to say, oh, I want to grab this single to-do, right? Oh yeah, sorry. I'm thinking about this the wrong way. I'm thinking about this the wrong way. Let's keep these things. So that would be something else then. How would that work? By the way, I would still have to-dos here. To-dos data. And then of course I need to type that as record string to do. And then record string. It really sucks that TypeScript isn't able to infer that. Anyways, let's just keep exploring. So now I have to change it again. Data to-dos data equals data. Oh yeah. What does it mean to open a to-do? Yeah, so we have to put everything into context here. So this kind of represents a page, right? Of the to-dos. Like not a page, but like it handles the to-dos. And then there's something called like to-do. And this to-do takes Hmm. Well, okay. So let's imagine this takes. Oh. How would I fucking do this? I just feel like things are getting just more tricky by adding this. It's very annoying. Like it seems so nice to have. And partially it is, but it also has a cost. Because you can't just reason about like, okay, I'm gonna fetch some data here, I'm gonna put it over there. Like it's not simple. It makes it easier, but it doesn't make it simpler. Very annoying. So what I would do here is like, what would I call it? Like open to do or something. And you have an ID and do. Yeah, so this is the thing. Like when you think about state that represents like an array coming from the server, it makes a lot of sense to just have that as a query, for example. But then you're gonna dynamically open different to-dos and do queries based on that. How do you actually do that? So one thing, like typically I don't think about this. I've never kind of been in that situation because I've built solutions where you just grab all the data, basically. So it doesn't matter what you open. So if I were to, for example, open a specific to-do, I would still go to the query and I will kind of grab the to-do from all the to-dos and I will download all the to-dos, right? But we're in this situation now where we're gonna like reflect on how would we dynamically fetch a single to-do, but it should still be part of the general data. So here I would actually call open to-do. So this would be to-do queries. So we would just do this. And then does this actually return a query? Yeah, it actually returns a query. This would be a record string and query of a to-do. Okay, so we have to-do queries and, well, maybe I can, yeah, query to-do, of course. Yeah, okay. Something's happening now. So what I would do is to-do query, well, let to-do query would be to-do queries ID, and if no to-do query, I would, let's see. Oh, look at you go. Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. I would just return the to-do query. Yeah, and there's a simpler way to write this. I can do this. Oh, fetch, no. So here, fetch, well, I guess we want to do this. Fetch to do, right? So now I want to fetch a specific to do. Async function, fetch to do, ID string. And yeah, whatever. And again, I'm gonna ID foo completed false. So what I would do here is that I would actually add the to-do to our actual to-dos, right? To the actual data. So that's what I mean about like not holding on to the value, is because in this query, we are, when we're fetching the to-dos, we are setting, like we've created the state for the actual to-dos, right? It's this data thing. And when I fetch the to-dos, I'm gonna update that data with everything. And then I can do, how would I, let's see, fetch to-dos. Yeah, maybe it makes more sense to actually have the query state in here. So you actually get that as an argument, because you don't get any arguments to this callback. But what I could do here is that I could have the actual state of the query. Whatever. So I could check, is it already fulfilled, for example? And based on that, I can choose to update the data if I want to do that. Anyways, let's talk about that later. So let's just review again. So in all simplicity, this is all I want to do. I just want to grab the to-dos and I want to keep them up to date, right? But instead of holding the value inside the query, I'm rather telling where do I get the data from in this query. So the query is all about fetching it. And then it's fetch to-dos that actually assigns that data somewhere. And then you have this second callback that tells you where to get the data from. So that's the first step. And then, but I also want to be able to fetch a single to-do. And this data is going to be tied together. So then I'm introducing like a dynamic set of to-do queries, because you're not going to fetch all the to-dos, right? This is based on like dynamically accessing different to-dos based on interactions. And then you're going to fire up the fetching of a to-do. So what we can do here is we can say query to-do. So this is going to be called, this is going to fetch to-do. So this is going to be called when the component renders. So the component that's responsible for showing the to-do is going to render, is going to call this as it renders. So if we don't have a query for this to-do, we need to create it. And then this is going to fetch the to-do. And it's also responsible for setting that to-do, right? And then this is where we're going to get that to-do from. It's from the same data record. So the point is that when I now fetch the to-do, I can actually check, like if we already have to-do's data ID, you know, I'm not even going to fetch it. I'm just going to return it immediately. Yeah, I'm not even going to fetch it because I've already done it, right? But if we don't have it, I'm actually going to go and fetch it, and then I'm going to set it. Yeah, and actually that means that the query doesn't actually need to return anything. Like the fetcher doesn't need to return t, because we're not going to use it for anything. Yeah, and that just emphasizes that we don't, yeah, this is nice. Yeah, so t now becomes the fetcher. Yeah, this is nice, because this just emphasizes that we're just gonna put the data somewhere. Let's see. Boom, 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 boom. And there's no transform. Yeah, let's remove this. Fetcher t. Oh, what about the promise? Fudge. No, but we can still handle that. We can still handle that. Yeah, because the promise, actually, the value on the... Yeah, we can handle that. Let's see. Fetcher, then getter. Yes, I think this makes sense. It's like, it's at least it's an interesting perspective. Let's just drop that one. Okay, so we're gonna iterate through this once more. So let's comment out all this stuff. And let's see if this makes sense. I'm just gonna return. The only thing, just before we start again, the only thing that's a little bit iffy now is that the fetcher and the getter what if in the fetcher you just did this? So instead of returning yeah, maybe this does make sense. Thinking. No, because we don't want to... Oh, thinking. No, we don't want to hold on to the value in the query. I'm sure of that. Because we want to share that value with other queries, or be able to. So we need to have that getter. But there's something about like doing a fetch which doesn't return anything. It's weird. But what we could do is we could have a fetcher that returns a getter for the data. That will be possible. But that's also a little bit weird, right? Maybe not. Okay, let's try that. So we're gonna... Does that even make sense? We're gonna return a getter. So we're not gonna return a value itself. We're gonna return where you get the value from. No, I don't think that makes sense. Let's try this first. Because the whole point is that Mobx is also mutable, right? So we're not used to this in React. We're used to like functions returning something. We're used to map, not for each, right? Yeah, I'm gonna try this. Okay, let's talk through it again. So I have some to-dos, and I want to store those to-dos in a record. And the reason I want to store them in a record is just that they're easier to look up. So I plan to like have updates to these to-dos, whatever. Well, maybe we could simplify even more. Let's do multiple of these. So let's do the first one, this absolutely simplest one. So the absolutely simplest one does not handle a to-do. as to do. Oh, sorry, to do DTO. Let's call it to do then. Yes. So this is the absolutely simplest one, where we fetch the to-dos and we put them on the data. But there's something about, like, I don't like this. It's like, why do you have these two? It's almost like if I just did this and I rather did return to-dos. Oh, sorry. And then return to-dos.data. I think that makes it simplifies this thing for sure. It's quirky, it's exotic, but it is the thing that allows you much more flexibility. Or maybe you could have it as a second argument. And so by default, a query. So there are like two signatures. Yeah, one signature, which is fetch to-dos, which actually holds on to the value. So the query is the value. But then if you have a second argument, you don't return the value anymore. It's expected that you set it somewhere. Yeah, this is interesting. Or maybe that could be, you can choose, right? You can return the data, or you can return a function, or you can return a getter for the data. And by returning a getter for the data, that basically means that you're storing the data somewhere else. Like you want to, okay, that's an interesting thing. Okay, we're gonna try to change this. Let's just, like, just have to keep iterating on this and see if it like finally makes sense. So either you return the actual data or you return a getter for that data. Not sure what you're complaining about. Oh, yeah. Yes. So what happens now is it happy? Oh, yeah, we don't have a getter here. But what we need to do is, let's see. Where do we actually set the dot value here? So we're getting the promise. Now we're saying this is T. That's true. What does this mean? Okay, this is a problem. Because now the promise, like if you await the promise, no, wait a minute. So then, yeah, because here it's T or, okay. So value, type of value equals function, not undefined function. We're going to call it, or it's going to be value. Why are you complaining? Why are you saying it's not callable? Here you're saying it's t or it's a function returning t. And I say, if it's a function, call it. Why doesn't this work? And why don't I have any music? I need music. This is weird. Huh. Has no call signatures. But if type of value is function, call it. Or just keep the value. Why? What the fudge? Promise t or a function to grab t. But another thing here is if I'm calling the function here, it's going to be a problem. I think. Is it? No, it's not going to be a problem. Okay, I'll need to call it here. I don't know why I can't call it. Just ignore that. Like this should return t or promise of t. And no idea why this fails. This is super weird. T and, but I'm not saying it's t and function. Why do you say t and function? It's not and function, it's t or function. And now suddenly here it's t and function. Yeah, it's weird. God damn you, TypeScript. I rarely have issues with TypeScript these days. But sometimes I do. And then I get very upset. I have no idea why this is not working. Well, can I make this just a T? Does that actually work? No, it says promise any. Is it because of that? Why does it say promise any? Okay, I'm getting hungry and I'm getting upset. This is just super annoying. Why does it say promise any? Yeah, whatever, fuck it. So we're gonna get so you can choose to return just the value, or you can return a getter for the value. And then here, the promise is going to have the actual value. Like at this point, we're going to have the actual value. So why did we use a getter? Do we even need that? Like, I keep forgetting that we're in a mutable world. So maybe we don't even need this. Like, maybe it's fine to just put, you know what? This is fine. Okay, let's go through it again. Was this the first to-dos? Yeah, okay. Fetch to-dos. So here we're just going to return the data, right? Yeah, you know what? I'm messing this up. This is much simpler. I keep forgetting we're in a mutable world. So here the query is fine, right? But what if we wanted to keep this value? We wanted to keep a reference to this value, right? Well, then we can just say data to do like this. Oops, as to do. So that other things can, we can keep things in sync. That's basically it. So now instead of just returning the data, we're also gonna put it on data, right? But we're still returning it, but these have the same references. So this is perfectly fine. And then we can go to the most complex example where I want to dynamically set up queries. And we don't need this thing. And then we're creating an object because I want to do lookups instead. And then we have fetch to-dos. Let's see. Fetch to-dos, data. Again, we just return the data. And this is a to-do. And then we want to say data reduce, accumulate to-do. Come on, help me. Thank you. Thank you. So we want to make the data a record. And then when we fetch a single to-do, we can just check. Do we have to-dos.data here? And if we don't have it, we're gonna update that specific to-dos data and we're all good. Like, this is the thing. Like, when you live in a mutable world, you can reference things like this. You can just like, well, okay. That's not completely true. The problem, god damn it. The problem is if I now revalidate fetch to-dos and I replace all the data, this fetch to-do, well, no, that's going to be fine. That's actually going to be perfectly fine. Because this is just going to run again. And then it's going to use the new data. Yeah. Because if I were to replace this whole data, anything listening to this to do, like there's a specific component that has like, yeah, sorry. Up here to do query. No, wait, this wouldn't work. No, this wouldn't work. Ah, oh, god damn it. Why is this failing, by the way? Oh, or undefined. Sorry. This wouldn't actually work. Because now, if I were to revalidate fetch to-dos, I would go in and I would change all the data. And if I'm not computing the value here on this to-do query, this to-do query is pointing directly to the object of this thing. No, it needs to be a getter. But like, when do you need a getter and when don't you need it? That's the thing. And then if you actually use a promise here, if you're actually awaiting the revalidate, then it's fine that you get that specific data, because that's what you're waiting for. You don't need a getter there. But it's when you access like the query. No, the promise also needs to be a getter. Yeah, no, that's the tricky part. Because a promise doesn't have a getter. So when I await, damn it, this is difficult. Yeah, no, I think I'm gonna eat something. Yeah, we need to think about this. But there is something about this that if you actually want to share, if you want to share data across queries, you can just create, like, don't put the query, don't put the actual data inside the query. You rather create a shared state between the queries. Like, that's the whole point. Just create shared state that all the queries can use, and then you just put the data there. The challenge though is that these queries still needs to have a reference to that shared data. And the most intuitive way to handle that is to have a getter. So instead of actually returning the data, you return a getter to the data. Which would work just fine for like accessing state.value, for example. But if you access the promise, either using suspense or you're just like looking at it from inside your state management, that promise also needs to be a getter. And that doesn't work. Then it has to be a function. You have to call it. And that is weird. That is weird. Yeah. No, we didn't get to the end of this. Sorry. But if we can find a good solution to this, it's gonna make data fetching a lot more accessible from components. Yeah. Okay. How would you... So if you revalidate, you replace that object, then the single to-do query, is won't work. They're stale. Because they're actually not observing anything. But if we use the getter, they would be observing the actual source of the data. And there's something very appealing about that. And if we return a function from the fetcher, that means it's a getter, which is, I also think, is super nice. But what do we do with that function internally? So for the actual like query state, we could actually make it a getter. Like the value property could be a getter. And we could even make the promise, like the observable promise, the value on that one could also be a getter. The only thing that can't be a getter is when you await the promise. Oh, but it can be. Oh, wait a minute. It can be. Okay. It can be. This can be a getter, and it already is, right? Yeah, and it already is. So here we can attach the thing that converts, like calls the actual getter. So we're actually gonna, oh, this is nice, because now okay. So grabbing the promise, we're gonna do a check here. Then let's see. We're gonna have this failing. Let's see. So this, the fetcher can be that, or it can be that. By the way, we're gonna pass to the fetcher. We're gonna pass the state of the query, so that you can evaluate what you want to do with the fetcher. Like if the query is already fulfilled, you might just want to update some data, right? Instead of like returning new data. So that's just nice to have there. And then we're gonna do value if type of value equals function, return value, call it, return value. Oh, look at that. But oh, it says this is T. Oh yeah. Sorry. So observable, create observable promise. So this can be T or T. It's not going to do it here. Oh yeah, so fetcher now needs state. Oh, yeah, state. Wait, why are you doing this to me? Not state, but state query. Oh yeah. So yeah, sorry. Do we have internal state? Internal. Yeah, so this is going to be this one. But that's not going to help for everything, right? New promise. Ugh. How are we going to handle this? Why are you complaining now? Oh, promise any? Oh yeah, because now the internal promise is... Ugh. This is a really bad typing situation. Where's the internal thing? You know what? We don't really need this. We can, this is such like an internal thing. So the problem here is that we're like calling, but we can just say, like this is going to be T. Why are you complaining? Promise T. Oh, promise T. Oh, how do I, as T? Why are you complaining so much? Promise T is not assignable. What did I do? Oh, create. Yeah, you know what? Create observable. We don't need it here either because we're not going to call the thing here. T. Why did this change so much? I didn't do anything. Oh, it's because, okay. Yeah, sorry. So this is going to be, sorry, as promised T. What? Isn't that, oh, is it observable promise? Oh, sorry, this is suspense promise T. There we go. Sorry. Okay, so the only thing we did now is that we're just calling it T, but we're typed the fetcher. We've typed the fetcher so that you can, like, it allows you to return a function. Maybe we don't even need to type that. We actually don't need to type it. Yeah. No, we have to type it. Yeah, we have to type it, I think. Anyways, and now we kind of fixed the promise. So when we await the promise, every time we point to the promise and await it, we're going to check if the return result is a function. And if it is, we're going to call it. So you always get the actual value. And this is going to be working, even though like the internal reference changes, this is going to be working. And then we need to do the same for the state. So where do we set the value? Yeah, so this is going to be get value. And then we're going to do exactly the same here. We're going to say, oh, let's do promise.value. And then we're going to say then type of value equals function. We're going to call the value, or we're just going to return the value. That's the only way you can grab the actual value. It's from the state value, or yeah. And when you do that now, you're going to get the correct reference. The only thing, wait, there's one more thing. It's the, it's React. So, okay, we can do the same thing here. So we have create fulfilled promise, get value, return type of, yeah, we need to do the same there. Okay, this feels a bit hackish. I'm not sure how I feel about this yet. But what we effectively achieve now is that, okay, you can do a very simple thing of just returning the data. That's fine. But if you want to share that data with someone else, you go in and you do that. And then instead of returning the actual data, you update the data where that shared data is, and then you just return a reference to it. Why did you complain? Oh, yeah. That's fine. That's just how TypeScript works. That's kind of annoying. That's a good thing about classes. You don't get into that typing situation with getters and stuff. But no matter. Now we're rather deriving the data. And then anything else can update this data. That's fine. And whenever you point to the query, you'll always have a reference to the current data. So even if you do if you do revalidate, it's going to replace the data, and that's fine. But if something else replaces the data here, like replaces this array, the pointer to the query is still going to be correct, because it literally points to this. And then if you want to do dynamic queries for to-dos, you have the same concept where we wanted to make a record here, and then we want to fetch the to-dos, and then for each query to do. So this is just dynamically creating state, really. It just happens to be queries. And then for each fetch to-dos, we're updating the data, but we're gonna again to-dos.data. Oh, sorry, it's a record now. But now we're gonna return a pointer to the data. And what's interesting is, like, technically you didn't have to do it here, because we don't allow anything else to actually replace the record. Like, it will never be replaced. Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, you actually have to understand, but kind of like React as well. You have to understand, like, you can get into problems by not updating references, but here you can get into trouble by updating references. Anyways, and then we have fetch to do, which means that if we already have the to do in there, we're going to return a derived for it, and then we're going to do the same here. Yeah, so I'm going to change this. If no, if we don't have the data there, we're going to grab it, set it, and then we're going to return a reference to it. The point now is, if I go and revalidate fetch to-dos here, that would update the record, right? But now this is going to react to that, because I'm using a getter. I'm computing where it gets that data from. What situation would this be an actual problem? So if I were to replace this whole record, that will cause React to reconcile any list of to-dos, and it will pass in a new reference for each to-do, which would call fetch to-do again, and it would have returned a new reference. When is it actually a problem? Maybe this isn't an actual problem. Maybe I'm overdoing this. And if I didn't replace it, I would like use the query state here to just update each to do. And then the reference is the same. And if I deleted a to do, yeah, if I deleted a to do, yeah, maybe this is not necessary because you'll always have, like, that's the thing I'm forgetting is like these things are nested in React. Like, is there any situation where you would have like looking at a to-do unrelated to the actual list of to-dos? So for example, what if you have users? Like you have this record of all the users and then you're deriving the user from, like maybe the to-do has an author and it derives the author from the user's record. So you have like an author ID, which is really a user ID. And then no, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I guess technically there is a chance of like, I'm just showing a to do somewhere. And then I go into the record and I just delete that to do. And then there's no reference to it anymore, really. But the query would still have a reference to it. So in this case, that to do in a component would actually show as undefined, or it would error. But if I don't have this getter, then it will just show still. And what do you actually want to happen there? The whole point is that we are sharing this record, and you want it to be a lookup into that record. So what I can say here is like fetch to do. Why is this? Oh, sorry. Data. So what I can say here is like this fetch to do's, it owns the record, right? This is the only thing that actually changes the keys of the record. So there's no reason to return a getter here because it kind of owns it. But there is like, yeah, what if something else just goes in there and changes it? Or replaces it, I mean. Then you have a problem. Then you have a stale query. Yeah, so you do want to do this. It just means when you return a function, it just means you're sharing some state. And the reason we do this is because you don't want to have a query where you only do the fetching and then you have to go somewhere else to get the data, right? That doesn't make any sense. So you could call it a computed query, right? It's a computed query where they share their source from data in this case. I think that makes sense. And it's like progressive. So you don't have to think about it initially. But as complexity of data happens, and you want to optimize the hell out of it, then you have the tools to do so. Yeah, and then what you could do here, like for here you could say query state. Do I call it query state? I should call it query state. Rename. We should export that. Where were we? Oh, sorry. Where was I? Query state. So this is query state. Oh, this is also interesting. This isn't really. Yeah, that should give an error. Yeah, that gives an error. Cool. Yeah, that's true. Because this is a record of string to do. There we go. Oh, it still gives an error. What's happening? Why is this wrong? Type to do. Type record string to do is not assignable to what? Oh, did I wait? Fetch to do's. What's wrong here? Oh, sorry. My bad. Yeah, so what I can do here, I can check the query state. If the status is resolved, then I can choose to, oh, sorry. So if it's resolved, this is another thing. This shouldn't be query state. This should be query. Oh, maybe I don't have to pass it, actually. I can just point to it. Yeah, sorry, I can just point to it. That's better. So if to do's query state equals, oh, sorry, status equals result. The only problem here is that this might be aborted. I don't know here if this thing has been aborted. So this is a problem. Like, god damn it. This is another problem. So this fuck. This is just horrible stuff. When I call fetch to do's, I might revalidate again, right? So this really needs to be pure. It can't have side effects, or the aborting won't work. So the way this really needs to work is I would kind of have to do, you would kind of have to do this. Return to this data. Because only now it can be aborted, right? Because now it won't do anything with the return value. Like, yeah, this is very interesting. Ugh. But at the same time, this also reflects the whole thing, is that you're not just returning the value. You actually want to handle but now it's also gonna, this is so bad because now it's also gonna, because you want to call this function when the promise resolves, but then you have to do another function to create the getter. No, this is fucked up. This is not gonna work. This is stupid. This is just stupid. God damn it. I need food and I need to do something else. I need to think about this. Okay, bye for now.